Okay, last week's recording hasn't been posted yet. I couldn't figure out how to do it exactly from my tablet, and I didn't have access to my computer here in Toronto, and now I'm back in Toronto, so I'll try and get last week's on as well. And I will say also before I forget, this is what's going to happen next week. I will send out to you the exam between now and the next few days. And then you are to complete it by Wednesday evening. Then when we get together on Wednesday evening, we're going to go over it. All right. So we can make sure everybody understands if they made mistakes, where the mistakes were, what have you. And then you will send me the results thereof of the test, the exam. All right. And we'll also do some Hebrew next week because we haven't done it for a few weeks. I'm not going to get to it tonight. And we'll see if we cover anything else on that evening. Okay. So I will send an email out to everybody reminding them about this and how we're going to handle next week. Okay. All right. So before getting back to the Kashrut, which we started last week, I just want to briefly discuss this week's Torah portion. We're still in the middle of the saga of Joseph and his brothers. And it's quite clear that Joseph is testing his brothers. He wants to see if they're the same kind of men who sold him as a slave, what they will do to his brother Benjamin, how they're going to react when he's threatened. And so what happens is that Judah takes the lead, because if you remember, he was the one who promised his father Jacob that he would be responsible for bringing Benjamin home. And so he goes and says to the agent of Pharaoh, he doesn't know it's Joseph yet, and he reviews what has happened. And he says, you asked us all this stuff, and we brought our youngest brother to you, and now you're going to cause all. Yes. Is there somebody want to say something?
Sorry. Hi.
Hi. Okay. All right. So he says, more or less, he says, look, it's in a sense, he says it's all your fault that this is happening. But he says, all right, let me take Benjamin's place. Let me be the slave in his place. And then finally, Joseph can no longer contain himself. And so he sends everybody out. And he tells his brothers, I'm Joseph, your brother. And they're shocked because they didn't recognize him. It's been over 17 years. And he's dressed up like an Egyptian official who knows exactly. He probably had it clean shaved completely, as was often the case we see in some of the hieroglyphics and drawings about ancient Egypt. But eventually they are convinced that he indeed is Joseph, and how he is wants them to go back to bring their father Jacob and all their properties with them to Egypt. In the meantime, Pharaoh is made aware of this circumstance, and he indeed welcomes Joseph to bring his family there. Joseph already, though, at the beginning, is not 100% trusting of Pharaoh and the Egyptians. It's interesting to note, he wants to segregate his brethren in the land of Goshen, keep them together, keep them apart from the Egyptians. Says that they are shepherds, which according to the biblical account is anathema to the Egyptians. Right? So when Pharaoh meets the brothers, Joseph again emphasizes that they are indeed shepherds. In the Pharaoh speaks to Jacob, who, when he asks him how old you are, he says, the years of my sojourning, and, which is already a strange language that he uses. And he says, 100. The years of my sojourn on earth are 130. Few and hard have been the years of my life, nor do they come up to the lifespans of my fathers during their sojourns. Okay, so Jacob makes clear that he feels like he's had a very difficult life. He hasn't yet attained the old age of his father Isaac or Abraham, but he is not comfortable the way his life has gone. Now, before Jacob left the land of Canaan, he worships God in Beersheba, and God promises him that he will be with him and bring him back up. And so we're told, we're giving a census of Jacob and his family. It says 70 people came down to Egypt. That number is very problematic, and we won't go into it. And lists all of the names of his sons who have come, and with their families who have come down to Egypt. The very end of the story is, I find fascinating, because what we see is that Joseph is in charge of distributing food. Paro has collected it as taxes or some way over the past 5 years of plenty, because 2 had already gone by, storing it up for the 7 years of famine. And so the people first buy food from Paro through Joseph, and then they have to sell their cattle, they have to their lands, finally even sell themselves to Paro. So in essence, all the Egyptians become slaves of Pharaoh. The reason why I find this so interesting is that it lays the blame for what happens, credit or blame, however you want to look at it, at Joseph's feet. Okay? It's very clear. It says at the end of the Torah portion, then Joseph said to the people, whereas I have this day acquired you and your land for Pharaoh, here is seed for you to sow the land. And when harvest comes, you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be yours as seed for the fields and as fruit for you and those in your household, and as nourishment for your children. Right? And they said, you have saved our lives. You're grateful to my Lord, and we shall be serfs to Paro. And Joseph made it into land law in Egypt, which is still valid, that 1/5 should be Pharaoh's. Only the land of the priests did not become Pharaoh's. Thus Israel settled in the country of Egypt, in the region of Goshen, and they acquired holdings in it, and were fertile and increased greatly. And we're coming across that again when we start the book of Exodus, Sefer Shemot. So the reason I make mention of this is that very often in Jewish history, Jewish businessmen, Jewish court Jews, as they were sometimes referred to, in other cases, served as managers of estates of non-Jewish authorities. We had this especially in Poland. And they were the ones who were between the nobles and the peasants. And so when the peasants were not thrilled with what was going on in their lives, especially vis-a-vis the heavy taxes and the heavy burdens that they had to the lords of their manor, their area where they lived, they also saw the Jews being involved with that. And one way of understanding some of the conflict, not all of it, but some of the conflict in Eastern Europe between Jew and Gentile has its origins in part to this fact that the Jews were that go-between. They become the target for the dissatisfaction often of the peasants. If I draw a very modern parallel, many Jewish businesses were established in different parts of different cities early on when they came. And as time passed, those neighborhoods began to change. Jews themselves moved up and out, and people who were less financially able, especially people of color, or newer immigrants from Latin America moved into those neighborhoods. And the stores were owned by Jews who had, they made their profit from the local customers. And they sometimes felt that they were being taken advantage of. Sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. But nonetheless, they saw the Jewish businessman as being, in a way, a part of their problem financially and socially in the world in which they existed at that time. And when we find that there were riots and things, often Jewish businesses suffered as a result of that. And that gave rise, unfortunately, in the Jewish communities to sometimes neat reactions in the other direction. And so we find that still that tension sometimes exists today. And, all too often, human interaction is a result of a totality of various aspects of life. And that's one of them as well. All right. So anyway, I just find it fascinating. We find the first example of that, although it doesn't say that the serfs of Egypt were upset with Joseph, but one can imagine, if you have to give 1/5 of all your crops to Paro, you wouldn't be happy. That's a pretty hefty 20% tax in those days. Okay, so that is this week's Torah portion. And we're drawing close to the end of the book of Genesis, as we will see shortly. That's next week's Torah portion. Okay, last week we started talking about Kashrut. I want to review a couple of important items that we mentioned, and then go on to some of the issues that come up in life. Remember, the type of animals that can be consumed are all based upon the biblical language. Those animals, those creatures that live in water, whether it be salt water or fresh water, have to have fins and scales in order to be a kosher fish, thus eliminating all sea mammals, all crustaceans, those good kinds of things. If they walk on land, they have to have 4 legs, have a split hoof, and chew their cud. Right? That's the uses of, they were thus herbivores, grass eaters. No meat-eating animal would fit into that description. Although I understand that the farmers often mixed all kinds of things in feed that their cows get, and sometimes that includes beef byproducts, so they make the cows cannibals, but that's a different story. Right? And then there's a list of birds that we're not completely sure of, and so it became tradition that certain birds were consumed and certain birds were not consumed because we weren't sure which are the kosher ones and which are the non-kosher ones. Then both fowl and cattle, sheep, goats, have to be slaughtered in a ritual manner called shchita. And the person who performs the shchita is the shochet, the ritual slaughter. Before he begins slaughtering animals, he says a bracha, a blessing, and has to cut across the throat, severing the major arteries there, and allowing the animal to bleed out as much as possible. Certain fats and certain sinews, especially the sciatic nerve in the hindquarters, are not consumed by Jews. We do not eat that. So today, for the most part, you can only eat the front quarters of sheep and goats and cattle. The flesh must be salted to remove as much blood as possible. Once that has been done, if you cook something and it looks like there's blood in it, that's not considered to be blood anymore. So I like my steaks when you put your fork in, it says moo. I do like my steaks that way, but that's perfectly kosher. You don't have to kill the steak and make it so well done that you break your teeth on it. Right? Although Eastern European cooking has an unsavory reputation of cooking meat to death. That in part was because the cattle they usually got to eat was so bad, the only way you could eat it was if you cooked it to death. All right. Where was I? Okay, so certain parts of the animal are not consumed. And then also there is a statement repeated 3 times in the course of the Torah. Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo, you will not consume, or literally, you will not cook, seethe a kid, a young animal in its mother's milk. From that, the rabbis derived a total ban between dairy and meat products. We do not consume them together. We do not cook them together. We may not have any kind of benefit from that mixture. Okay? We're not even allowed to do business, say, taking kosher meat and putting a piece of nice cheese on it and selling it to somebody who's not Jewish. We're not supposed to do that because then we're making a profit of mixing milk and milk when we're cooking. If it's cold, it's a different story, and that's why you can mix in a bit of cheese with your dog's chow or whatever they're eating, as long as it's not hot. Okay, so all the dog lovers out there, they can do that. Okay. Now, actually, one of our 2 dogs is so picky, we often have to put chicken in with her food to get her to eat it. Of course, the rest of it's not kosher meat, but that's neither here nor there. She doesn't care. She doesn't eat kosher. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about what my friend and colleague, Rabbi Wayne Allen, and I call the physics of kashrut. The reason we call it the physics of kashrut is because the rules and regulations that we're going to be talking about tonight do not necessarily parallel what a scientific inquiry might come up with. Okay, let's just start with that premise. Whatever we're going to say is the way the rabbis of old interpreted, and that became the standard by which we follow today. So, for example, if I have a piece of meat that has not been salted, soaked and salted to remove any blood, if I put it on a barbecue grill that is brand new, let's say it's never been used, and put it over the charcoal. I'm only use charcoal. I don't believe in gas barbecues, right? You put it over the flame, wherever it is. The blood drips out, the blood that was not removed through the act of salting drips out, and you can eat that meat. But some of that blood, and this is where we come into the physics of kashrut, is absorbed into the grate of that barbecue grill. Okay? And the next time you use that barbecue grill, that blood, when the grill gets hot, that absorbed blood can come out. Now, if I'm cooking another piece of meat that was unsalted, so it too was exhuming blood, it won't absorb that blood, no problem. Still with me? Okay. So if it's hard today to find unsalted meat. You can't find unkosher meat. But in the old days, when you had to kosher your own meat, and there would be people who had to really watch their salt diet, and still are, and they have to deal with that. What they would do would be to grill the meat over a flame. Now, that, by the way, that's what you have to do with livers. Liver is so full of blood that the only way to cook liver is to first grill it in order to get the blood to come out. So you must have a pan with holes in it or a grill that allows the juices to flow out into the flame in order to have liver. But if I had a piece of chicken that had been salted or a piece of meat that had been salted, it's not going to be exuding blood when I grill it. Since it's not exuding blood when I grill it, it can absorb the blood that was in the grill. So if you use if you're going to cook meat that's not been salted, you can only use the utensils, and that's a grill, not a pot. A grill that is only used for unsalted meats, chicken as well, all right? If you're using the grill for salted meats, which most of us are going to do all the time, except for the livers, which you can't use on that grill, then that's fine. It's not going to absorb anything, but you then cannot use it for the meat that you want to cook without being salted. Right? Similarly, if you're going to cook your livers over your barbecue, you have to have a separate grill for the livers that you're going to cook on the barbecue grill. Okay? So that's item number one of the kashrus that we need to be aware of. Right? That the understanding is food items or the taste of the food can be absorbed during the cooking process. Still with, all right? So the language of the Talmud is the taste. The taste of the food is exuded by it when it's heated, and what's coming in contact with can absorb that taste. And, all right, so let's say we have meat, and I put meat in a pot, and I put some water in because you don't usually grill meat on a pot. Right? So I put some water in, and I boil it. What we're going to call, for lack of a better term, the meat molecules, the meat flavor, the tam, the taste of the meat, goes through the water as it absorbed into the walls of the pot. Okay, so the next time you're going to use that pot, it is going to have absorbed meat molecules in it. And when you heat up the pot, some of the meat molecules in the pot will be exuded into the water that you're boiling. And if you have other meat in that pot, no problem. But if you put some cheese in it, you're now mixing meat and milk. Okay, that's the essential idea behind it. There's a quality to the food, the meat, the meatiness, the meat molecules, whatever you want to call it, that exude from it, gets absorbed into the walls or grill or whatever it's being cooked in. And then when that's used next, those molecules, that meatiness can come back out. And that's where the problem of mixing milk and meat for a pot comes from. Now that's because of the application of heat. If heat is not applied, let us say I have a very dry piece of chicken, and I'm not paying attention to what I do, and I put it down on a nice dry piece of cheese. They're both cold. There's no heat applied. I didn't do it intentionally. So all I have to do is make sure that the meat gets wiped clean, that no residue from the cheese is on that meat, and make sure the cheese is wiped clean, making sure there's no residue on it. And then I have no problem. Okay? Because neither one of them was hot. All right. What is the definition of hot? The definition of hot in the Talmud is if you touch it, your hand automatically bounces back. Right? If you ever touch something hot, you know you don't have to pull your hand away. Your hand's going to do it all by itself, unless you have some problem, right? Yad soledadbo, the hand jumps away. That is considered to be the heat necessary to be considered the cooking level. So if you started the pot and you haven't got it very hot yet, you can touch it and hold it with your hand, that's not yet cooking temperature. All right. So now because of that, and the fact that you sometimes might take a piece of meat or stew or whatever and stick it on your plate when it's hot, the plate can absorb the meat flavor. And if you then turn around and want to put a piece of cheese on it, the same problem. Similarly with cutlery. So the rabbis understood that when it comes to pots and pans, metal utensils, they can absorb the flavor of something that is hot, that's put in them, or is cooked in them. If you made a mistake, right now we're just talking about pots. Let's say I have a nice big soup pot and I want to make pasta with vodka sauce. It's a nice recipe. Okay. So I put my noodles in. Well, my noodles are just plain flour and water. In my case, other kinds of things because I'm gluten-free, right? No problem. Well, not so fast. If you had used that pot for meat within the last 24 hours, the noodles have absorbed the meat flavor. And now if I want to put cheese on it, that's a problem. And let's make it even worse scenario. I now take and pour my cheese sauce into that pot with the noodles to mix it all up so I can have my recipe. Well, if it's just a very small amount of cheese and noodles that were in the pot, the noodles become treif, non-kosher. If the amount of cheese, the amount of dairy product, all right, we'll go back for that for a moment. Okay, so now I've got a pot that was supposed to be meat, and I've cooked dairy product in it. So now it has meat molecules in its walls, and has dairy molecules in its walls, and they're making lovey-dovey to each other, which is a no-no. Okay, you like the way I handle it? Okay, so what am I going to do? Well, the cheese casserole, I threw that out. Do I have to throw the pot out? No. Now, the way we can kosher metal utensils, let us say if it's a small pot. I get a real big pot and get water boiling in it. Okay. Now remember, how did the pot absorb the meat or dairy flavor? Through the water, the hot water that entered into the walls of the pot. And when I put water in it and boil it and put that a smaller pot in it, what was ever in that smaller pot now gets boiled out of it and disappears. So I've now koshered the pot. The pot is now neutral. It is neither dairy nor meat. Now, we don't go back and forth. We're not supposed to go back and forth between meat and dairy. This is if you have an accident. Okay? So when you have metal utensils, pots and pans that are cooked on top of the stove, this is the way you can kosher them. That's going to come up again when we talk about Passover. If it is something that is used over a flame, let's take the grill from the barbecue, you either have to use a torch to get it real hot, or you build up the fire real hot in your barbecue so it's hot and let it go for a while, and that will cause whatever's in it to dissipate and take care of that problem. So that's metal utensils. The biggest problem that people confront is pottery. The utensils we use every day are dishes that we have. The rabbi said that pottery absorbs flavor, the molecules, but it cannot be boiled out. You cannot use the plate again. Let us say I have a meat plate, and I made my vodka cheese casserole, and it took it right hot out of the pot and stuck it on that meat plate. I have a problem because it was hot, gets absorbed into the plate. Now, according to some authorities, that's the end of the story. Throw away the plate. There is an opinion that is widely accepted that is based upon the concept of bad taste. You know, if you leave some meat out for a couple of days, you know what a bad taste is. Notain tam nifgam. And that taste is something that even, nobody wants to eat it. It's no longer classified as food. So when koshering a pot, what we do is we don't use it for 24 hours, or utensils, we don't use them for 24 hours before we kosher them, so that any taste that is left in them is what is called notain tam nifgam, spoiled taste. And then I can kosher it under those circumstances. Now, what about the plates? Well, according to the Chacham Tzvi, and this is followed by many, especially when you're dealing with expensive china, that if you leave it for 1 year without being used, then it becomes notain tam nifgam. You just wash it off, and then you can use it. Okay. Now, one of the issues is not just the pots, but let us say, I'm back to cooking chicken, although my wife usually does that part of the cooking. I'm the barbecue man. All right, we put I can't even talk now. Cooking chicken soup. Okay, just the broth. We're not going to worry about the chicken itself. And stupid me, I'm drinking a glass of milk, and I look into the pot, and lo and behold, some milk accidentally spills into that soup. Okay. Now, what am I going to do? I have my glass upstairs. I'm not going to drink it. Okay. What am I going to do? Well, the rabbis said that if you can taste something, it's as if it is there. Tam Ikar, the way you say in Hebrew, taste is like the very item itself. If I can taste the milk in that chicken soup, then the chicken soup is treif, no good. I have to throw it out. How do I know what it tastes like? How can I taste it? Because if I taste it and I can taste it, then I'm eating non-kosher. I got a problem. So the rabbis of the Talmud said, what you do is make sure you have a nice, friendly Gentile neighbor who's a very good cook, and you offer him some of that soup and say, tell me, what does it taste like to you? Can you taste, tell me what ingredients are in it? You say, well, I can taste some chicken, some garlic, maybe little spices of some kind, and a little bit of milk. Okay, goodbye. Throw it out. If he says, or she, I can taste the garlic, I can taste the dill, I can taste the chicken, some salt, some pepper. That's it. Thank you very much. I go and eat the soup. Because, the real world when something is so minute that you can't even see it or taste it, it's as if it doesn't exist to a certain level, right? But it's kind of hard today to go next door and say, tell me, can you taste this for me? Either they know what you want, in which case they might give you the answer you want, which is not what you wanted to do, or they think you're just totally crazy and have no idea what's going on, or they're not really an expert taster, and so you really can't rely on their tasting. So without going into the details of, the rabbi said under normal circumstances, if it's both items are kind of liquidy, 1 part to 60 nullifies. If it's 1 part and 60 other parts, the 60 other parts rule. So if I had chicken soup, just the broth, and the milk fell into that chicken soup, and it's clear that the amount of the chicken soup is 60 times the volume of the milk that fell in by accident, we call that batel b'shishim, nullified in 60. So when you're cooking your soup, first of all, don't drink your milk glass over the soup pot. But if you make a mistake and you have an accident, before you do anything, throwing things away, look at it. And if it's not it's not absolutely clear to you, talk to your rabbi. Do I have to start all over again?
Rabbi Berman, just a quick question. So just to clarify, so the difference between the whole meat molecule concept and then the taste concept is whether it's an accident or not.
Well, what it is the meat molecule is a meat molecule, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Okay? You can't put milk in intentionally. Okay? If it comes in by accident, then it's nullified because you can't even taste it. I look up around me right now. There's all kinds of stuff floating around in the air. I can't see it. It might as well not exist. Right? So if it's so minute at that level, it's existed as if it no longer exists.
Just to add to that, so if for example meat molecules got into the side of a pot, surely we would not taste that. Is what I'm trying to get.
Oh, okay. No, well, but it's in there. It's mixing up, and so you'd have to kasher.
Accident.
It doesn't. Well, hopefully it's an accident. Okay. In either cases, in that soup pot that you had that 1/60th in it, that would not be a problem. You wouldn't have to kasher the pot. Okay.
I have a related question, and maybe this just pushes it into the realm of impossible. But let's say you were cooking for a large barbecue. Say you got 600 hot dogs that you're cooking.
I'm coming to that.
And
I'll come to the hot dogs in a minute. Okay. All right. Now, what we were talking about so far is essentially liquidy kinds of things. I'm not going to talk, because stuff with flour and pasta, we're not going into it right now. Okay. But what if it's a piece of meat? Or in this case, hot dogs. Okay. The ruling principle, interestingly enough, is much more lenient. If the majority is kosher, then it's all accepted as kosher. Let's say I have 3 hot dogs, 2 kosher ones, and a guest came and not intentionally trying to cause trouble, but he brought an Oscar Mayer wiener and mixed it in with my whatever brand of hot dogs you like. And I can't see a difference. I mean, if I look at it and I see a difference and I know what it is, you just throw it away or get it away from everything. But let us say I don't there's no way of telling the difference. Maybe tasting it, all right, but I can't know just looking at it. Theoretically, and this is the question is, what do we have now? Is it nullified, meaning it doesn't exist, but you have 3 kosher hot dogs in front of you, which is one interpretation, which means you could eat all 3 hot dogs, although you know for sure one of them was treif. Most people suggest you don't know which one is the Oscar Mayer. You take one of the hot dogs out. It might be that's the Oscar Mayer hot dog. It might be it's one of the other hot dogs, but you don't know. And you dispose of that. So now the odds are better that the 2 hot dogs remaining are kosher hot dogs. And you're not intentionally eating one of them that you know was not kosher to start with. Okay. That's batel barov. If it's something like that, you rely on the idea of the majority.
Sorry, can I ask?
Yeah.
Just with what you just said and also what you were explaining before, just trying to make sure I understand. So you were saying, with the soup, the chicken soup, right? If you mix a little bit of milk or butter or something like that by accident, and then the 1/60th rule. But let's say it was like a broccoli cheddar cream soup, and you accidentally, you're eating a chicken sandwich and a piece falls in and it's still 1/60th. Is that still the same rule?
All right. Now let's. No, not exactly. First of all, if it falls into your casserole there, the chicken is visible, right? So you have to remove the chicken and whatever's near it. Okay, assuming it's not cooking at the time. If it's cooking, then comes other complications. We just have to check on the circumstances. Right? But when you can ascertain what the non-kosher item is, you must remove it before anything else. Then the 60 rule applies. Okay, so if you had that piece of chicken in it, you moved the chicken out, and the amount of broccoli and cheese that was there is 60 times the volume of the meat, then this 1/60, I believe, would apply in that case, because it's spreading out the flavor through the cheese. See, if it's just broccoli, that's a whole different story, because the broccoli is not meat, right?
So, and then the second part was what you were just saying about the hot dog example. That would be like if you're having a kosher meat barbecue and a non-Jew friend brings something with it and puts it on the same table, you don't know, it looks like steak or chicken or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yes.
What's the practice where it's like if you mistake if you flip your milk and meat plates by accident, some people put it in a potted plant?
Okay, not plates. Plates is a different issue. Remember, that's pottery. And many people are very stringent. If it was so hot that your hand couldn't touch it, then the plate goes bye-bye. Or maybe if you leave it for a year, especially if it's an expensive piece of pottery and you want to save it, then you can rely on the opinion that says you can let it go for a year. Now, what you're thinking about is the problem in the ancient world of how you remove grease. If I had a knife or I had a fork and I put it into something very greasy, how can I make sure they get all the grease out of it? So one of the things that the Talmud recommended was putting it into hard earth, or maybe even leaving it there, but certainly putting it into the hard earth to scrape away any remaining oils or fats that might be on it before you go to kashrut. That's, but you will find Jewish homes that seem to raise forks and spoons in their garden. They have a whole garden of forks, right? But that's really, from what I understand, is not necessary in today's world. Make sure you use cold water and soap, and you wash it off very well. And then maybe take some hot water to wash it off well before you put it into the boiling pot. Then that would be sufficient. Yeah.
Sorry, on that same point, because you said pottery, which I'm presuming
China,
like
China.
things like China, but now a lot of people for every day use glassware, right?
Okay, glassware is a problem. It may be a solution, it may be a problem. The rabbis of the Talmud, in their day, going back 1700 years or so, or longer, the glass in their age was very fragile. You could not boil glass without breaking it. Now, they said glass did not absorb also. So the leniency is, some will say, since glass cannot absorb, it doesn't make a difference. Maybe to be sure you don't have any problems, make sure you don't use glass. Well, drinking glasses, we try to keep separate drinking glasses, just because maybe they didn't wash very well. Or you got your kids doing the washing duties and they don't necessarily wash the dishes very well, or what have you. Plates is a little more different, but the thing is, you have to be worried about residue that's going to be remaining on them. Okay? So some people will allow glassware for plates and things like that. Talk to your rabbi, what your rabbi advises in that department. I frown on it only because it's subject to all kinds of problems. Okay, but if you never put something very, very hot on it and it doesn't absorb, like I say, it's not the best way, but it can be done. But again, talk to your rabbi. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, sorry, I just wanted to ask one last question, because you was with regards to the sort of barbecue or grilling example with the hot dogs. What about the or I'm not even sure if it's a rule or if it's just a custom, but like not supposed to be, even if it's kosher meat or kosher food in general, not supposed to be eating it if it was cooked by a non-Jew. You can eat food that's cooked to you by a non-Jew.
Okay, yeah. The rabbis are very stringent in many areas. We mentioned a little bit last week on, all right, and it's called bishul akum. Bishul akum means food that was cooked literally by an idolater. So the fear was, and I don't have a way of defending it, except that the ancient realities were such of the way people dealt with each other, sometimes like we deal with each other even today, unfortunately. Okay, there's a lot of untrusting and a lot of animosity and a lot of fears that existed amongst people. So the idea was that a Jew was not supposed to eat anything that was cooked by a Gentile. But if the cooking process was started by a Jew, there's your escape mechanism here, then it's okay. So if you go to a place that's a kosher caterer or a kosher restaurant, many of the staff, many of the cooks are not Jewish, but somebody Jewish turns on the stove, turns on the oven, turns on the grill. Okay, so that Jewish person has started the cooking process, and you have fulfilled the letter of the law by that understanding of it, and you're not worried about it otherwise. Again, with like a number of things, rather than just throw everything out, many times, you didn't hear it here, but the rabbis came up with a way of going around like this to make life a lot easier for people.
But with the like the hot dog example, by knowingly inviting, let's say, a non-Jew
No,
to bring
no, you're-
food to the barbecue.
Well, look, if you're going to be keeping kosher, the only people that you invite to bring food to your kosher barbecue are people you know who keep kosher and won't bring anything that's not kosher. And they follow the same level of kashrut that you do, your stringencies. Okay. Well, example, last week I talked about what is called Chalav Yisrael, Jewish milk, right? Remember? All right. I don't hold by that. I drink milk, not a lot, but any milk is fine with me. I'm not worried about pig's milk getting mixed in with my cow's milk. But my son, my oldest child, is stringent. He will only drink that milk. So when they come to visit us, I make sure that I have that milk available for them. Okay. I mean, I can drink their milk, but they won't drink my milk. And that works out. You know, similarly on levels of kashrut, different people have different standards and things. So you've got, when you set your own standards, besides what you feel is necessary for you, you have to think about who are the people that you're going to be relating with, that you meet the standards that they'll be comfortable with as well. Or they might say, all right, I can invite you to my home to eat, but I can't go to your home to eat. Some Orthodox rabbis, for example, in order not to get into that bind, will never eat in a private home unless it's a kosher caterer that comes in to do it. Okay. I've had that. I've had a kosher catering for a meal so that one of my colleagues, Rabbi Karabkin, who's the rabbi of the shul I go to, he could be there to have something to eat. So it was all catered because that was his standard. That's fine. He gets, when I was the rabbi of a synagogue, a person told me they kept kosher. I didn't investigate. I relied on them, their honesty, okay? Unless I had real reason to question it. Yeah. Some people have strange ideas of what's kosher. Some people make kosher. I don't have milk and meat together. So I never have a ham and cheese sandwich. I have ham sandwich, but not ham and cheese. Okay.
Rabbi, I have a question about steak with the blood. I'm curious how the you were saying it is kosher as long as you cook it, or
well, here's the thing. It's very hard today for you to find non-kosher. Kosher means it's been soaked and salted. Because it has to be done within 3 days. If it's not in 3 days, then the only way you can do it is by cooking it over a grill. But if you go to a store today, you go to a butcher shop today, it's all been taken care of. So you're not going to run into that problem. Where you would run into the problem, the issue would be with liver. Liver, you have to kosher that way. But otherwise, everything's been koshered.
Rabbi, I know you keep trying to get on, but we keep having more questions.
Sure.
Would you eat at a fully vegan restaurant if it wasn't a kosher vegan restaurant?
Personally, if I had no other option available to me, yes. I would eat if it was a totally vegan restaurant, and even under certain circumstances, maybe it was a totally vegetarian restaurant. Okay? And because I live in Toronto, well, other issues as well because of my diet, but in Toronto, there are enough kosher places that I prefer. If I am going to go eat in a restaurant, I go to one of the kosher restaurants. It's a very difficult business, restaurants, right? It's a hard business. And in the kosher trade, you lose Friday night, and half the year you lose, at least half the year you lose Saturday night, which are the two biggest nights for restaurants. So if I'm going to go to a restaurant, I want to support the kosher restaurants to make sure that when I do want to go to a meat restaurant, for example, it's there. If I don't support it, it won't be there. And you see, they come in and out of business all the time, unfortunately. And
Hi, Rabbi. Oh,
yeah.
oops.
That's
Sorry.
good. No
You can
problem.
keep going.
Catherine, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I actually had a question. I'm not sure if this was covered. So there's a lot of products that are marked as kosher, but they're naturally kosher, like water, for example. Like I've seen that, and I don't understand why they do that. Of course, it's a marketing ploy. I know that, but I
Okay.
just like, why are
I'll give you even a
those things-
stranger. I'll give you even a stranger one. A friend of mine is very much interested in the kashrut world. He writes stuff about it. And he explores a lot of these issues. He came across a poison that was labeled kosher. Okay. By definition, you cannot eat poison. It's not kosher to eat, but it had a kosher label on it. And so he asked the supervising agency that did it. And they said, well, you know, this Jewish housewives wanted to kill the mice or whatever it was, that kind of thing. And they would not have something non-kosher in their home. So they put a kosher sign on it, even though God forbid anybody should eat it. You need no kosher signs for water. However, when we're doing the however, you know, there's always, you have this hand and you have this hand. There was a big thing, and still is a problem, in New York City. There is a source of water that comes from a certain reservoir. And in that reservoir are these creatures that are visible to the naked eye. If something's in the water that's not visible to the naked eye, you don't worry about it. It's as if it doesn't exist. But these crustaceans, or whatever they are, I forget even the name at the moment, are found in certain parts of New York. And so those Jews who are aware of it and concerned with it put filters on their faucets so they can filter out these creatures. My son found one time. Right? He found it does exist. They're there. Insects are not kosher. You cannot eat an insect. If you find an insect doing the backstroke in your soup, you have to throw the insect away. It's not batul b'shishim. The insect has to go. Right? But it's not a problem of making the soup not kosher, because nobody would want to eat an insect. And so insects are bad taste. So since it's bad taste, it doesn't imbue any taste to the soup, but you can't eat the insect itself. Okay. So there are a lot of products that will have a kosher sign on them, and often it is absolutely unnecessary, but as you said, it's a marketing issue. Now, there were questions many years ago. Lard was used on a lot of products. You know, the aluminum foil, in order for it to come off the roll, has to have some kind of surface treatment in order to make sure that the aluminum foil is going to unroll. And there was a time when animal fats were used for that process. Okay? So that becomes an issue in those cases. But today that's rarely, almost non-existent. If something is used intentionally by the manufacturer, but let's say I was talking about insects, right? We said insects are not a problem, basically. But if the insect is there intentionally, then it's a problem. No, won't even go into the worms inside of some tequilas. Where is it here? My note. There is a food coloring called Carmine. Carmine is derived from the shells of certain beetles. And since it's intentionally put into an item to give it that red look, therefore it's not considered to be batel b'shishim, and then therefore you cannot use something that was made with that. There were a lot of things that used to be done, especially with meat byproducts, that really aren't done today, but there's still a holdover. Mono and diglycerides can be derived from animal fats. And there's some discussion about that in the sources, the rabbinic discussions of it. And now, if interesting enough, the Civet Absolute, which is derived from the secretions of a civet, a non-kosher cat-like species, this flavor component has a sweet animal-like odor and is added at parts per million to flavors used in beverages, ice cream, candy, and baked goods. Since it's intentionally added to add to the flavor of it, even if you don't think you can taste it, it can't, that's why you can't use it. That's why once things are being, if you have a plain vegetable, not a problem. You have things that are being cooked and mixed with other things, that's where the hechsher often comes into play. So we have the concept of, but yeah.
There's a lot of popular women's products, like face creams that have snail in them. And so
you're not going to eat it, it's
eating
okay.
But you're putting it on your skin. Okay.
That's not a problem. I didn't know that, but I thought maybe slugs would be, I don't know. You want to put it on your skin, put it on your skin, Amber. No, what might come to issue would be lipstick. Because there you can run into a problem because you do taste it, you do absorb it some when you're, or your partner gets a little taste of it, whatever the case may be. And so that becomes an issue. Okay? Passover becomes more of an issue, and we'll have to talk about that when we come to Passover. But skin products, things that you don't eat, things that you don't ingest, at least not intentionally, are not a problem. For example, a Jew can play football even if the pig skin is the football. Okay, there's no problem with that really. All right. Let me talk a couple more things. All right, I said vegetables, and now you're not allowed to eat insects, and most of you are too young to remember when DDT was standard issue for crops. DDT was a bug killer. It was used on everything. And that meant that you had all kinds of produce that were bug free, but it killed birds and all kinds of other things as well. And so when DDT was eliminated from the farmers markets, farmers products, there became a rise in insect infestations in a lot of food items. And some are very particular, very stringent when it comes to that. Some kinds of berries, they're hard to remove the insects that can infest them. If you have lettuce, lettuce has to be rinsed carefully to make sure there are no bugs on them. There are products out there that are sold with a hechsher on it saying that they've been inspected and washed and everything, so you don't have to worry about it. And worst comes to worst, if you find a product and you're in Yellowknife and you want to make a salad because you can't find any kosher meat there, and all you can find is some brand of lettuce that says it was washed. So you check it out very carefully, make sure no insects, who wants to eat an insect anyway, are there, and you could use it. But things happen. Many years ago at my synagogue, there was a bat mitzvah dinner, Shabbos lunch, and my daughter says to me, Abba, what's this on my lettuce? And this was a special lettuce that the woman, the mother of the bat mitzvah girl, had made sure they had for the dinner because it was hydroponically raised and there should be no insect problems with it. Sure enough, it was an insect. And the rabbi who was the mashgiach, who was supposed to be supervising, didn't do his job. He just let it come through. Oh, it's that kind of lettuce. It's hydroponic, no problems. I had to get up in the middle of the meal and tell people not to eat the salad. I mean, these were really a bunch of guys running around, these white insects. Okay. But that's why a lot of products, especially in the very super frum kosher market, are hydroponic these days because it's easier to control the insect infestations. And then that becomes a problem if you're into organic foods, organic vegetables and stuff. You've got to be extra careful to be sure that there are no bugs that are there. Okay, so we talked about nullified in 60. We talked about nullified by majority. You cannot nullify something intentionally to start with. In other words, you can't put something in that will create a problem and say, oh, it's less than 1/60th. There are a lot of kosher supervisors out there that have different standards. The major ones are fairly discernible. They share with each other, even if they are, quote, competitors. They pretty much have the standards that you can know what they're going by. When you don't know who they are, that's where they get into questions. Kashrut, like I said last week, can be a nasty business. It's a lot of money in it. And whenever there's a lot of money involved in something, there can be people who do shenanigans with that. One other last little bit. Now, when I talked about taste, right? Let us say I want to have some broccoli. We had broccoli earlier here. Good, clean broccoli, no bugs on that broccoli. And I boil it in my meat pot that I haven't used. It's clean. I haven't used, let's say it's certainly very clean. I used it earlier today. Can I use that broccoli with a dairy sauce? Now, some are shaking their heads, no. So you're following the Ashkenazic psak. If you said yes, you're following the Sephardi psak. There's a difference of opinion. It goes back to the Talmud again. The Talmud says, I take a piece of fish and I grill it on a metal dish, fried pan. Can I have it with a dairy sauce? So the Machaber, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Yosef Karo, says yes, you can have it with actual dairy product. The Ramah, Rabbi Moses Iserlis, who gives the Psak Din for Ashkenazi communities, which is what this mostly is, says no, but you could eat it on a dairy plate because it's not bar nut. The flavor went from the meat into the walls of the pot. That's the the taste. The taste then comes out. That's the child of the taste, as it were. So now, does that make something that is neither meat nor dairy a problem for them? No, not really, because it doesn't turn the vegetable into meat or dairy. Most people are very careful not to have that problem. So, the easiest way to deal with it is not use a pot that's meat for vegetables you're going to use for dairy or vice versa. Right? But the vegetables themselves have no kind of status when they're uncooked. Some interesting exceptions to the rule is a strange item of eggs. Eggs that have been laid by a chicken are neither meat nor milk. They're parv, just like vegetables are parv. A fertilized egg you can't eat, but in today's world, you're not going to find fertilized eggs in your grocery store. Go to a farmer's market, maybe you might by accident, or if you raise your own chickens, you can have that happen if you have a rooster around. But the way chickens lay eggs today, there's no real issue. But if you see a blood spot in an egg when you open it, traditionally most people would throw it out. If when you bake the items, if you bake them in pots and pans that are used only for baking and you don't use any dairy products in it, it's no problem. They can be you can have it with a meat meal, you can have it with a dairy meal. It's totally part. If you put milk product into it, it becomes dairy. If you cook it in a pan, a bread pan, or a loaf pan, that becomes a dairy loaf pan. Bread is usually one of the rules of the Talmud is we're not supposed to use dairy products in baking bread, because bread's not always visible to know what it is. So be careful in terms of that. So your bread maker, cooks out there, bakers, make sure you don't put any dairy product in your breads. If you have pets, I alluded to this earlier, you don't have to feed them kosher food. There's nothing wrong with pets having non-kosher food. As a matter of fact, even in the Torah, it says in one place, but the Talmud very clearly says, when you have a problem, let's say it was an animal that dies by itself, or it was an improper shechita, you can feed it to the dogs. There's no problem with that. You don't want to put dog food near your food, I'm sure of that, but the dog doesn't have to keep kosher. If they start keeping kosher, then you have all kinds of issues. They have to have a bar mitzvah and all those kinds of things. When we have a dog when my wife lights Shabbos candles, the dog has to be there to watch her light the candles. And when we make Havdalah, she has to be there for that as well. So we think there is a concept in Judaism called Gilgul, reincarnation. So one of the best reincarnations you can have is to come back as a dog in a Jewish household. I'm told that's really second only to heaven. Okay, any other questions? I hope I touched everything. Yes,
So, Rabbi,
yeah.
A question about fish being on a separate plate.
Yeah.
Maybe just
okay. The ancient, there are a lot of myths. That's the only way to describe it in the ancient world, dealing with food items. And one of those was the fear that fish and meat coming together could cause a problem. Now, maybe related to the idea that fish have small bones and all of that issue. But traditionally, fish is always eaten separate from meat. However, I know I've gone to a lot of fancy parties, and you see a lot of observant Jews who go back and forth, and they may not put it on the same plate, but they'll eat some fish, and then they'll go eat have some smoked meat, and then they'll go get a piece of sushi, and they'll come back around and get some more smoked meat. Hopefully they change plates, but they don't always. So a lot of people are not very careful in that department, but that's where that comes from. Similarly, we talked about wine last week, right? I talked about wine? Yes, no? And the same thing. So, there are various kinds of rules that go in there. The rule of wine, by the way, applies to grape juice as well, and grape products. All right. Yes.
I did have, sorry, one other question related to fish, because I some people had pointed out I was away for a couple of weeks there, and I was back in the Bahamas for this shoot, and there's not really much kosher. There is one Chabad, but you have to order weeks in ahead to have it kind of come in, and then and then if you're not staying in a home where you can cook, it's a whole challenge. So there in the Bahamas, everything is fish. Most restaurants cook fish, but also shellfish, because the national dish is conch. So it's a very prominent thing. So for me, I was just eating fish, regular fish that I knew was kosher fish, but at non-kosher restaurants, because there was really no other option. And then even vegetarian, it's still being cooked in a non-kosher restaurant, right?
Look, when you go, depending upon your standards, ideally, one should never go into a non-kosher restaurant. Sometimes you're in the Bahamas and you can only bring so many cans of tuna fish with you in your suitcase. So if you can't get salad, yeah, some cooked vegetables, usually they don't use the same pots. They usually have these big pots that they use for the veggies and other things. And so push comes to shove, that could be a possibility. If you know that's a kosher fish and you can arrange for it to be cooked separately, maybe put on aluminum foil or something like that, make arrangements like that to do that sort of thing. But, some people are very, very stringent, won't eat anything at all. Some make sure they bring, or if they eat something, they know that it's something that's not going to be an issue for them whatsoever. The various gradations of how strict you want to be. Again, I always advise talk to your rabbi.
Actually, I didn't even think of the aluminum foil thing because we have a different way of grilling fish in the Bahamas where we do wrap it with like onions and peppers in aluminum foil, then put that on the grill.
That's
I didn't even
perfectly
think
fine.
of that.
That's
Yeah.
perfectly fine.
Yeah.
That's good. Of course, if you don't put any shrimp on top of it while you're doing that as well. Yeah. No, that's indeed is the way to go. Yeah. Okay. Now, I will stress to you, one of the issues that the Beit Din, if you get to that end of the line, the questions they're going to be concerned with is kashrut. That's one of the biggies. Keeping kosher at home, what you do when you have to go out, how do you make sure you eat kosher when you're out in places? What do you do when you go to the Bahamas and need to do something? How do you handle that situation? If you say, well, I have no choice, so I have a steak, that's not going to fly. Can't have flying fish either because I don't think they may be kosher, I'm not sure, I don't remember. Flying fish might be. There are flying fish, you know that, don't you? Yeah. I grew up in Florida, so I saw flying fish. Big, they just jump out of the water with the big fins and look like they're flying. But that is one of the areas. Shabbat observance, Shabbat and Yom Tov observance, and kashrut are two big issues that the Beit Din will be very concerned with. You may not have to have the most upper level kosher from kosher on kosher that even the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory would eat in your home, although the Satmar Rebbe wouldn't eat in the Lubavitcher Rebbe's home, I'm sure. It wasn't kosher enough for him. But you do have to have a kosher home. You have to at least be in that direction, moving in that direction. If you go to vegan restaurants or things like that, then I'm sure many of the Beit Din would find that acceptable when you have no other option. Okay. Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? I hope to get last week's class online. As I said, I couldn't do it. Tonight's will be online at YouTube after I get off with you and do whatever magic that happens that gets it onto YouTube. And I'll try to get last week's as well. And then you will have it. And I will bli neder without taking oath to it, get you your exam before Shabbos. If you are a couple, registered as a couple, both of you take the test independently. Okay? And we'll see who does better. And if your partner says, well, I don't have to take the test, you answer to your partners, yes, you do. Rabbi Berman said so. Okay? And if you do better than they do, you get to, yeah, I beat you. Okay? Anything else? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'll say good night. Have a good weekend and all those good things. Okay.